I think that was exactly what we needed to have the patient's perspective. Please take my chair. First question that came in, we only have a few minutes for questions, I think is right online. You've heard the tension a little bit between the stakeholders' view, and one of them really centers around privacy versus productivity, we heard earlier. And the question that came in is how much will the issues of cost and time and the impact the ability to de-identify data? And I think Richard was the one who presented that de-identification was a major project in the Yoda experience. Maybe you could start.
Well, we're pioneering this. I think there's nobody, I think we're the first industry group to actually give this patient level data out independently before. So it clearly is a Rube Goldberg contraption right now to try to figure this out. And what we did was not scalable, that's for sure. And I think what we want to do is comply with HIPAA. HIPAA was designed not for this activity, so trying to fit that square peg in the round hole was probably why it cost so much and we're going around. So I think that the theme that we were all talking about here is as we look at all the different dynamics going on now, the way data is collected, digital medicine, the movement from proprietary data to sharing data requires a lot of other foundations to change as well. And I think that we probably should rewrite the notions about how HIPAA works with an eye towards facilitating this process quicker, and also get the patient's voice in there. And I think, as Sally had mentioned, we might find that some of those barriers to identification may be laxed to some degree when patients are participating as partners rather than subjects.
Although the amount of time and money it costs Medtronic and others in terms of the models we've heard sounds high, and of course it is high, and it might not be scalable. I think it's really important to put in the context of the profits or the earnings in the case of industry for the product at hand, or just the amount of money that's spent on the clinical trial, if that's what you're talking about to begin with. So the cost of disseminating the information from the clinical trial at least needs to be put into the context of how much time and effort you put into the trial.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our experience with Datasphere has been slightly more modest in terms of time. We logged this very carefully with the biostatisticians that we were using, and it took around a week to 2 weeks for the two major data sets of programming time. And we spent a lot of time with biostatisticians and so on, but we have the 17 key areas from HIPAA, and then we have this modified statistician method. So there's a little bit of a variance in terms of the amount, but I think I agree with you, Deborah, when you're looking at sort of $100 million data sets, which some of these are, the value that's there, it's well worth investing the time in 2 weeks of biostatistician and programming time to make these data sets available.
Thank you. Why don't we take a question from the audience, and I'll pose one before that if there's someone who'd also like to share one. One question I have, and this was sort of brought up by at least one of the speakers, is the time and complexity associated with assembling these data sets and partnering with academic groups, making contracts across different companies, etc., may be actually a burden and a barrier to the actual successful assembly of the data that we all say should be published as a public good. So one question I'd ask for this audience, recognizing there are no members of the regulatory agencies on the panel, is what is your view of the transparency of the regulatory activities and whether or not regulatory agencies should be part of this process in analyzing, transmitting, and exposing public data, recognizing that under the current guidelines it's not permitted, but they are, of course, discussing it in the EU, as many of you know.
Jeff, I wanted to speak to this point because I dealt hands-on with the complexities of putting the data sets together, and I just wanted to mention that the FDA has an initiative right now, and I'm part of a group of people who they solicited their opinions about uniform data submission, required data fields, and how data should be collected for trials, and this could facilitate these kind of efforts in the future.
Just to add to that, CMS, which you probably don't think of as an agency that does research, CMS has just launched this summer an office dedicated to pushing out CMS claims data to researchers and other recipients. The director has just been named. I think this is in part coming out of health reform, where if you're going to add a lot of new folks to the insurance rolls and control costs, you have to control the cost of the care that each additional person gets. And there's, I think, some insight there that all of this existing claims data tells us something, as you were saying, the care that the patients are getting is valuable. So I do think you're starting to see a change at the government level.
Any other comments? All right, please, thank you.
Issues, and now the other issues related to patients. Patients seem to be sort of the barrier in here in a lot of ways because a lot of the protections are for them. But let's just go back to what we learned in kindergarten, because I'm a patient and this is all about communication. We need to say please, we need to say thank you, and we need to just ask people to share. And everybody gets a trophy because that's the way they play t-ball now. So if we just look at those principles and move forward and not just keep making the same mistakes, then I think we have a solution, and I thank you all for being here.
Comments, please.
Just a quick comment to appreciate what you're saying about asking, because I think HIPAA is there, and we're spending a lot of money and time on removing these HIPAA identifiers, but that's a regulatory fix that was trying to protect people. But there is another way to think about privacy, and that's the positive right to privacy, which is I control who has access to my data. Not just my data will be hidden and anonymized by someone else, but I control who has access to my data. So if we asked someone permission, as patients like me has seen, they might choose to put a lot of identifying information in there. So I think you're right on target. We should do more asking.
Yeah, Cindy, I agree with you completely. I mean, we've spent a lot of time looking at legal issues, IT issues, clinical issues, biostatistical issues. And while they're all complex, I think the single biggest thing that prevents us with data sharing is effective communication. We see it as about 80 or 90% of our project. All the other things are sort of more mechanical processes you can get through. But dealing with people's emotions and communication is one of the biggest challenges we face. I agree.
We're running a little bit over time, and I'd like to get everyone to lunch now. And so I just want to check, Rebecca, what time should we be back? 1:30. Okay, so we only have about 20 minutes, 22 minutes. Thank you very much for an excellent panel and discussion.